download our Revise It Right revision app for hundreds of videos, quizzes, exam questions, tutor support and so much more. This video is about compounds. Now a compound is something that is made up of two or more different atoms bonded together. So we've just looked at elements, which is a substance made up of only one type of atom. So for example, a gold element would be only made up of gold. But this is a compound and they're made up of two or more different atoms. So for example, water. Now water, as we know, is made up of two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. Okay, so we draw it like this. Okay, to represent that they are chemically bonded. So water is a compound because it's made up of two or more different types of atoms. It's made up of hydrogen, which is one type of atom, and oxygen, which is another type of atom. Now another example, or a very well-known example, is carbon dioxide. Now as we know, carbon dioxide is made up of one carbon atom bonded to two oxygen atoms. So again, because it's two or more different types of atom, carbon being one type and oxygen being the second, we call it a compound. And the final example we're going to look at is table salt, which is sodium chloride. Now sodium chloride, or table salt, is obviously made up of one sodium and one chlorine. So it's made up of two different types of atom, so therefore it is a compound. A much larger compound that's made up of more than two types of atom, but is still a compound, is glucose, which is made up of 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. That is a compound because it's made up of 1, 2, 3 different types of atom bonded together. Now it's important to note that the properties of the elements that you find within the compounds are different to the actual compound. And what I mean by that is, if we take water for example, now hydrogen is a gas and oxygen is also a gas at room temperature, whereas we know with water that's a liquid. So you can see there that the properties of the elements, or the atoms, hydrogen and oxygen, are different when they've bonded together to form water, H2O. So just remember that compounds are two or more different atoms bonded together, whereas an element is only one type of atom. Remember to download our Revise It Right revision app, watch over 700 videos, answer 4,000 plus quiz questions, over 1,000 flashcards, 1,000 exam questions, worksheets, forums, and get help from qualified teachers, and so much more. The link is in the description. Now a formula shows what atoms are in a compound. So the examples that we just looked at are H2O and CO2 and NaCl. Now what these show you and what these tell you is not only what atoms you find in a compound, but also how many of each atom you find in the compound. So let's take H2O as an example. This tells you that there are 2 hydrogens in water, and because oxygen doesn't have a number next to it, it would be 1, but we don't show the 1, then oxygen is only 1. And with CO2 as an example, there's no number after the C, so there's 1 carbon, and there's 2 after the oxygen, so there's 2 oxygen. With NaCl, there's no number after Na, so there's 1 Na, and there's no number after the Cl, there's 1 Cl. That means that 1 sodium atom binds with 1 chlorine atom to make 1 molecule of sodium chloride. Let's take a bigger example as we looked at, which was glucose. This tells you that there are 6 carbons in 1 glucose molecule, 12 hydrogens in 1 glucose molecule, and 6 oxygens in 1 glucose molecule. So we can use a formula to not only tell us what atom is in an element, or in a compound, but also how many of that atom are in that compound. So they're very, very important to understand and to know what they mean. So now I want you to have a go at answering these questions. If you pause the video, we'll go through the answers after. So pause the video now. Okay, so let's go through the answers. A substance is made of 3 different types of atom. Is it an element or a compound? Well, we know that an element is only one type and a compound is 2 or more, so it must be a compound, the answer to that question. So that is a compound. A substance is made of 3 of the same type of atom. Is it an element or a compound? Well, these are the same types of atom, so in this case that must be an element. What is the main difference between elements and compounds? Well, elements are made up of only one type. So elements is one type of atom, whereas compounds is 2 or more. So that's the main difference. What are the names of the 3 subatomic particles? So this is a bit of a throwback to a previous video. If you haven't watched a video on atoms, then please do. So it's protons, neutrons, and electrons. Now, there are 5 sentences below. 2 are true and 3 are false. What have we got? So, if you want to know the name of a compound, you should look at the periodic table. Well, the periodic table is a periodic table of elements. You don't find any compounds in there, so that is false. A lump of iron is an example of an element. Well, it only contains iron, therefore it is an element, so that's true. Table salt is made of sodium and chlorine atoms joined together by chemical bonds and is therefore a compound. Well, that was one of the examples we just looked at, so that is true. If you want to make an element, you need to take different types of atom and chemically bond them together. Although that would be a compound, not an element, so that is false. And finally, a piece of gold is an example of a compound. Well, again, gold only contains gold atoms, so that is false. So there are the 3 false answers and the 2 true answers. So you have now looked at compounds, what they mean, and how to represent them by a chemical formula. You can now test yourself using the quiz and answer any of the exam questions on compounds. If there's anything you are struggling with, then please do get into contact with one of our tutors and they will be happy to help.